thank you very much indeed for coming and listening to me and to all these other people as well, of course, but also to me. As you can probably hear, I don't come from around here, I come from London, and it is absolutely fantastic to be here at what seems to me an extraordinary week. And I am indeed going to talk about women and about women in the workplace, and indeed about how, if you are an employer or an employee, some of the things that we now know about women in the workplace can actually fuel performance. But I started with this title because I'm also going to tell you some facts, give you some numbers, introduce you to some concepts. And knowledge is power is a phrase which I think probably many of you have heard before. It comes from a long-dead and inspirational man called Francis Bacon, who was one of the first experimental scientists and actually literally caught his death of cold carrying out experiments. And I believe passionately, that seems to be the word for this afternoon, that if you understand more about the workplace in which you are, you will operate better in it as an individual, as a team, and as an employer. But because I'm going to start with a little bit of history, I'm going to start with a number of very peculiar questions, and particularly peculiar pictures. This is a peculiar picture. We're going to dance around the world. This is a peculiar picture too. So is this. And so is this. And to understand why these are peculiar pictures, which, if we look at them now, strike us as peculiar, just look to your right and look to your left. And what is interesting about those pictures is that they are all men, every one of them. And the other thing that is peculiar to us about those pictures is that when they first came out, nobody would have noticed that, because it would have been entirely normal. That was how the world was. It was run by men. Men were the people who worked. Men were the people who ran things. And it is a vanished world. And it has vanished at enormous speed, and it has vanished absolutely, utterly. And so what we have today is a world in which, for example, half of all professional and managerial jobs are held by women, in which female salaries are actually increasing faster than men's, and in which, among young people who are doing the same sorts of jobs, there are no gender gaps left in how much you earn. If you're doing the same job, you've been doing it for the same amount of time, you've got the same qualifications. For people in their 20s and 30s, professionals, managers, people in business, the gender gap has gone. So this is a revolution. This is a complete and total revolution from the whole world that our ancestors knew. And so today's workplace looks like this, and this, and this. And all of those are actually pictures that were illustrating something completely different. They weren't out there in order to say, oh, look, there are women in the workplace. They were about other things. And we wouldn't have noticed anything peculiar about them because to us, this is normality. So what does this actually mean in terms of how the world operates? We've got twice the talent on offer. We no longer shut up half our brains in the kitchen. But does it mean anything else? Because, after all, XX and XY are different. I called my book The Double X Factor because it's only women who have the double X factor. By definition, men have XY. So what does it mean? Does it mean anything that's really different in the workplace? And I want to suggest that it does mean something very different, but also that some of the things that are going on in the workplace we misinterpret because we are still hung up on the way things used to be. So let me ask another question, a bit like the Forrest Gump one. How many people here have seen an episode of Mad Men? Okay, so it's probably close to 100%. And the interesting thing about Mad Men is it's not just that it's not that long ago, but that what is going on in many of those episodes is something which I would say is primeval, except that we've got rid of it. Until very recently, if you were a woman, the only thing that really mattered in your life, the thing that would transform your life for good or for bad, the thing that was going to dominate everything about your fate, was whether or not you made a good marriage. Everything else was secondary. If you made a good marriage, your life would be good, and if you didn't marry at all, or if you didn't make a good marriage, your life would be bad. Now, I'm not saying that who you got married to was irrelevant to men, but for women it was absolutely everything. And what you're seeing in Mad Men is the last traces of that, because a lot of those women are in there because they are looking for and they need men. And so much of what is going on in that workplace is very much of that sort. Over the last few years, the way that the workplace operates and the way people behave and the way they present themselves in the workplace has changed dramatically because this has changed. And as it changed, one of the things that you can see happening is that people's behavior alters. And again, I just want to give you another snapshot from history. The first generation of working women, serious working women, tended to dress like air hostesses. There was a very, very successful female entrepreneur that I interviewed for my book, and she said, I was the generation that went in there, we went in there in white shirts, drab blue jackets, pumps, because we had to show that we were serious, that we weren't doing anything that was overtly sexy. We were there to do business. So we dressed like that. Nowadays, she's a big couture customer, and the women around her, not just the ones who've made it, are more likely to be wearing that than pumps. But there's another little vignette I want to give you, and this does all come together at the end, which is a boardroom or a meeting room. Next time that you go into a meeting, a mixed group meeting, men and women, which is after all what most of our meetings are these days, as long as it's not full of everybody who's also been to this afternoon's event, have a look at how people seat themselves. Have a look at who they sit next to, particularly in a sort of, a room that's a bit bigger than this, but also around a boardroom table, or in my case, I'm an academic department. And I promise you that the women will be more likely to sit next to each other than you would expect if people were sitting randomly. And I actually said this to my husband when I was writing the book, and he said, I don't believe you, this is absolute nonsense. And I said, you look. So he did start looking, and he said, yeah. And then he talked to the 3 most powerful women he knew, and they thought about it, and they said, yeah. So have a look, but as I said, it has to be people who haven't been here, because after you've listened to me, you then go and do the opposite intentionally. And I'll tell you what I think is going on. And it's partly to do with the shoes, and we'll come back to the shoes, but it's partly to do with something else. What is happening in that boardroom, and what was happening with the air hostess look, was that you are saying to men, we are not trying to be sexy. We are not here to do that. We are not giving you a come on, we are here to do the job. But at the same time, what you now have in the workplace is you have men and women taking advantage of a very powerful fact. And that powerful fact is that actually how you look, how you bear yourself, how tall you are, how fat you are, has a bearing on how well you do. We find this very hard to accept. We don't like to believe that we discriminate in favor of the good-looking and against those who are not good-looking. We don't like to believe that we discriminate against the obese. We don't like to believe that the president of the American Economics Association, for heaven's sake, is likely to be the best-looking candidate. But the evidence is against us. We do. And it's just as powerful for men as it is for women, and it's especially powerful for lawyers. Don't ask me why. Lawyers are different. And what is going on is the same story as the peacock's tail. And the peacock's tail is not only beautiful, it's something that evolutionary biologists have been fascinated by since Darwin, because it makes no sense. You can't fly efficiently, you can't run. You're just standing there waiting for a fox or a wildcat to take you out. And yet there they are. There they are with their tails. And if you were a small brown peahen, would you go for that? Or would you go for something that looked leaner and meaner? The answer is you'd go for that. And why you would go for that is that it says to you and it says to the world, I'm actually so powerful. I am such a good flyer that I can even fly with that amazing tail. And so, in evolutionary terms, the peacocks with these amazing tails, the ones that weren't eaten by the wildcats, had so many more children than the less beautiful peacocks that we now have peacocks with tails. And this is a very powerful concept. It's the concept of costly signaling. And it says to you, at a subliminal way, I am a powerful person. I'm a person you want to be around. I'm somebody who's going to do well. And the interesting thing about it is that, as a species, we project onto people who have things that attract us a whole load of other positive qualities. So we believe that the guy with the beautiful tail, or the Rolex watch, is also likely to be competent. And we also believe that the politician, male or female, who has not gone grey or white, is more fit. And that's why the whole Chinese Politburo dye their hair black. And that's why you won't find a single female senator in the US Congress who doesn't color her hair. And that's perfectly rational. And that, by the way, is the point of those shoes. Because they say, I'm doing well, I am really good at my job, and I don't care that I have to take a taxi all the time because I can afford it. So what has happened to the workplace is that the signals have changed, but the signaling is the same. So a lot of what is going on in today's workplace is that men and women really are behaving in the same way. That what women are doing in the same way as men, as they are signaling using age-old signals that we absorb at a quite subconscious level to say to the world, I'm good, I'm doing well, I keep myself fit, I look after myself, I have self-control. So what does this have to do with the workplace? Where does the punchline, where does the takeaway come? I think it comes in two areas, or maybe three. First of all, it says to men and women, yes, you are now working in an environment where everything we know about the workplace says that you are behaving in similar ways. And that means that women are now no longer required to be air hostesses because we've got past the Mad Men area. Now you can signal, we can signal in the same way as men do. And so it says to you, I'm afraid, that it's actually worth doing that. But it also says to you, and this is where the knowledge is power comes in, as fellow workers, as team workers, as people choosing people for a project, as people employing people, we need to be aware that signaling is not always a good thing. If you can be signaled at, you can also be deceived. A creature that can perceive can also be deceived. And so I think the other takeaway is that as an employer, as somebody putting together a team, you have to try to go beyond that. You have to be aware, for example, that a lot of what you are responding to may not be the right thing, that you should dig into people's backgrounds, their positive aspects, the things that they've got to show for you, that you should believe the people who say that an interview is often a very, very inappropriate thing on which to hire somebody unless it's a salesman that you're after. So that's where I want to stop. I want to say, this is what's going on. Understanding is power. Go with it, both in your own self-interest and in terms of using this as a member of a team, as somebody who's going to hire things. And I guess I also want to end with a stock market tip, which is that you could do a lot worse because of this than invest in certain types of luxury good. Thank you very much.